If you're a CityCast superfan, you have definitely heard us singing the praises of our longtime supporter, Paulson and Nace. Big news! Paulson and Nace is now Nace Law Group. Same great team, just with a new name. When you are hurt by the negligence of others, you want a lawyer that will actually fight for you, not one that will settle for the bare minimum. Nace's compassionate lawyers fight to bring cases to juries so you can get everything you deserve. If you've been hurt or lost a loved one because of someone else's mistake or negligence, call Nace Law Group for a no-obligation consultation. Visit www.washingtondcinjurylawyers.com or call 202-463-1999.
If you're like me and want facials that actually deliver real results, then you have to check out Silver Mirror Facial Bar. Rated the top facial in DC since 2019, Silver Mirror specializes in expert-driven 30-minute and 50-minute facials that tackle real skin concerns like dullness, breakouts, and fine lines. First-time guests get $30 off their first facial, and they have locations in DuPont Circle, Penn Quarter, and Navy Yard. Just use the code CityCast30 at silvermirror.com/CityCast to claim your offer. That's CityCast30 for $30 off your first personalized facial at silvermirror.com/CityCast.
Today on CityCast DC, DC's mayor is slowly rolling out her budget, and it is all about trying to brace the city for the unprecedented Trump-era challenges that are hitting Washington's biggest employer, that is, the government. For Muriel Bowser, the answer seems to be giving private business a freer hand to do what it wants. Until recently, this would have been a non-starter for the DC Council, but could it be different this time? Axios' Cuneyt Dil covers City Hall, and he's here to explain. Today is Thursday, May 8th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, Cuneyt.
Hey, Michael.
So Mayor Bowser presented a portion of her budget on Monday. This is, just a proposal, but it is every year treated as sort of a big event because it's a statement of their priorities. And this year, maybe a bigger event than usual because it takes place against the backdrop of a real sense of economic emergency for the city based on what's happening to the government and the national economy and so on. There's three main pillars of this budget. Can you explain what they are, why they matter?
Well, I think it's maybe useful to say we don't have our full budget yet. And let me get the frustration out of the way as a reporter and as someone covering the Wilson building. We don't have the mayor's full budget and we don't know what she's trying to cut. But what the mayor is doing is she's having press conferences announcing her budget in piecemeal because of a whole congressional budget saga that kind of delayed everything. The budget that she's going to propose is doubling down on her sports investments. She sees sports as an economic driver. Obviously, Capital One Arena is getting money to improve itself. Now there's an RFK Stadium project. There's $500 million for the stadium in the budget, just for the stadium footprint. And there's more money, $500 million more for the rest of the site. And this budget that she's going to announce tries to focus more on downtown investments as well. There's about 40 million-ish for getting more people into downtown from the National Mall by creating more of a pedestrian walkway or plaza experience for people near Gallery Square and other places downtown, just to make that connection better between National Mall and downtown. There's also some money for tech companies and startups in the budget. She's going to try and encourage more startups and businesses relocating to DC. And there are some measures here that, what she says, cut red tape. DC is in an environment where it's trying to encourage business growth. So some of these things are going to try and cut regulatory hurdles, and we can get into all those as well.
So you wrote a pretty great column a few weeks ago, sort of announcing this is the end of DC's progressive moment. Balance that had tipped towards more sort of traditionally left items had shifted back towards things that are more wanted by business elites and landlords and sort of vested economic interests. This is, the mayor is talking about this in the context of we need to do everything we can to create more private sector jobs and to goose economic growth that doesn't involve the government. One of the things you mentioned here that is this red tape, and she is talking about reforming zoning and limiting the appeals process. That stuff is there for a reason, and I assume there are some people who don't want it, quote unquote, reformed.
Yeah, the reason I wrote that column was because, and it makes sense when you look at what she's proposing in the budget. If you pay attention, you hear a lot less of council members talking about the progressive ideals that they championed for the past decade. You have a lot less conversation about what's the next big government spending program that we're going to initiate. There's a lot more talk instead about how do you make government work as it already exists? How do you make basic services work? I talked to Charles Allen, who's a progressive, and he talked a lot about how do we get basic government services working. I talked to Christina Henderson, who's maybe a progressive pragmatist, and she said people don't want the flashy, they want the bread and butter to work. So there's a big shift away from these big progressive programs into how can we grow the city's economy? How can we make do with the money we have? And how can we make things work as it currently exists? And so the mayor's already like on board with this. She's a pro-business person. She's not a typical progressive lawmaker on the left. And so her budget now is gonna have, I think, a lot more, clear sailing in this kind of DC council where the money is tight, the economic picture is not great post-pandemic, and some of these investments, I think, are going to have more sympathetic ears this year because the realization is you do need to grow the tax base again. You do need to do some things that will help the business sector, the restaurant sector. And, some of these things are like making it easier to build homes, getting some of the zoning burdens out of the way. I think even with RFK Stadium, you're seeing a softening of Phil Mendelson, the council chairman, his tone toward using taxpayer money. Just on Monday, he came out and said his personal view is he doesn't support taxpayer funds to be used on stadiums, but he tried to square this point where it's his personal view versus what he's going to do as chairman of the council, which is he looked much more open to a deal that could advance despite the taxpayer investments. There's about $1 billion of taxpayer funds proposed by the mayor for RFK. So that's all to say that I think this is a council that is much more open to pro-business concerns in a way it wasn't, I think, for the past decade.
Well, and this idea that the real hindrance here is that there's so-called red tape holding up the ability to build things, which I guess some people see that not as red tape, but as measures designed to protect tenants or the environment or quality of life. But that idea that there's red tape is holding things up and this is why places can't get things done and we need to cut the red tape, that it seems like classic liberal abundance agenda, to use a current buzzword.
Exactly. I talked to someone in the mayor's circle the other day, and they reminded me you couldn't go around the city without seeing cranes everywhere about maybe 7 years ago. I mean, you don't really see many anymore. Construction has slowed down. So some of this is, I think, literally helping projects move faster. I think some of it is also you need to give them momentum. You need to give developers the feeling that the government is trying to help you. And I think that does matter. And I think whether it's RFK or projects across the city, it's obvious they need some kind of boost because Northern Virginia has grown a ton and DC is losing some of that investment.
One of those things she wants to do to cut delays is reform TOPA. That's the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, the law that lets tenants get first dibs on buying a place they live in if it goes up for sale. And it can really, really, really slow things down. That kind of reform will speed things up. It helps developers. But what's your read on the politics and the practicality of, does it help, besides developers, does it help everyone else? Does it help normal residents? There's obviously going to be different views on that.
TOPA helps tenants purchase the unit they're renting from their landlords. Bowser proposed a bill in February that I'm seeing the Washington Business Journal reported on this. It would dramatically reduce the eligibility for TOPA. So if you're a renter, you could only seek to buy the property if you live in a place that isn't market rate housing. It would only allow it for units that are deemed as affordable housing. And so it would dramatically reduce the effectiveness, the scope of the program. That hasn't passed, but now this is part of her budget. She's going to try and reform TOPA through the budget.
But what's your read on the politics of this? Historically, this would have been a non-starter, but right now, I think the narrative is pretty loose that, one reason there's a housing shortage and housing is so expensive is that the ability to build things or sell things or redo things, it has just been really slowed down. But do you think there's enough support there in the council as it's currently constituted to give her a win on something like this?
I think this and other things that may have not passed in the past on the council might sail through because there are so many other parts of this budget that are going to take up the council's time. And since the budget is so late, they have less time to go over everything. Compound on top of that, just think of the cuts that we don't know about yet.
Well, right. We're still waiting for $400 million in cuts based on what Congress has done.
There's $400 million in cuts for this year's budget. There will be cuts for what we're talking about next year's budget that they're going to go through. So, plus there's the old RFK Stadium deal. So TOPA reform could go through because of that. It'll also be a test, just big picture about progressive activism. Can they muster enough activism to block something like that? We're going to see.
Ever wondered why mosquitoes bite you? Or maybe you're curious about policy, like solving the housing shortage or bridging the digital divide. Or maybe you want to hear it all. After the Fact, a podcast by Pew, breaks down today's big issues with expert insights and real stories. Whether you're into the research or the personal stories behind it, we've got you covered. Get the stories behind the stats. Listen to After the Fact wherever you get your podcasts. Paint Care is all about keeping it simple for district residents. They make recycling leftover paint, stain, and varnish easy with convenient drop-off locations, like your local paint or hardware store. Each new paint project is an opportunity to reduce waste, and Paint Care has 3 simple rules for painting smarter. 1, buy the right amount of paint for the job. 2, use up leftover paint. And 3, recycle the rest. To get tips for how to buy the right amount of paint, explore ideas for DIY projects for how to use up leftover paint, and to look up your nearest drop-off site in the district, visit paintcare.org/3simplerules.
All right, so every Mother's Day, we treat my mom to a special day out. She gets her nails done. We take her to tea. We go out for dinner or we make her dinner. That sort of thing. Now, I can do all of that because I happen to live close by her. But a lot of my friends don't live near their parents at all. And all their mom wants is a phone call. But what if you could get her something more than just the phone call? That's where Aura Frames comes in. Do you have a funny photo of you and your friends or you and your family that she would love as a keepsake in addition to that phone call? You can send her a new picture of you and the gang right from your phone. Even my tech-averse mom would be a huge fan of that. Aura has a great deal for Mother's Day. For a limited time, listeners can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off plus free shipping on their best-selling Carver matte frame. That's auraframes.com, promo code CityCast. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply.
The sort of headline item, though, this week, combined with the Bowser's appearance alongside President Trump and Josh Harris, the football team owner, is this idea of a big investment in sports and this being a driver of the economy. She wants to set aside a chunk of the budget for Capital One, like you said, and this stadium on the RFK site. And sort of as an afterthought, maybe, there also talk of investing money in the local theater scene, too. Why? This seems like sort of bread and circuses stuff where the kinds of people who work at sports stadiums and theaters are not typically like highly paid like government workers or consulting firm workers. Why do they think spending money on sports and entertainment is so important?
The mayor is doubling down on the tourism economy for the city. I heard her recently say this is one of the big economic drivers of the district. Um, I, th- I mean, personally, I think the city either had to get its schools really good on par with the suburban public schools to keep families and people in the city, or it needs to invest and double down in the sort of attraction economy. And at a time when the federal government and its future is uncertain here, when you're losing jobs from the feds, when that big workforce is declining, she's going to go for the tourism, the attraction, the entertainment economy, and that's what we're seeing play out. I think she's
But wait, just so I understand, is the argument here? Because look, if you get rid of a bunch of federal civil service jobs and federal government contractor jobs, and you replace them with a bunch of like concierge jobs and busboy jobs and peanut vendor at the stadium jobs. That's not an economic win. Is the idea that the people from out of town who come to be tourists and watch games, they're going to throw off so much money that it's going to boost the tax base in ways that make up for that?
I mean, some of this is like vibes economy type of analysis. Like you see a lot of people coming in for Caps games, and you picture a lot of people coming for RFK games in the future, and you think, okay, we're saving our economy. The reality is, it's not a big part of the pie for DC's economy. I mean, to their credit, I guess they're investing in tech as well, which is something DC kind of abandoned for a long time. They were very skeptical of any subsidies for tech companies or business startups. They're going back to try and investing in that now. There's a $52 million new venture capital program with DC and private dollars to try and help early stage DC based tech companies. This is something launched last year that they're trying to grow. They're reviving a qualified high tech company tax incentive. So they're going to try and give more tax breaks to companies again. So it's going to be hard to get these tech companies that went to Nova. Like Nova is pretty good at getting tech companies and startups at this point. It could be hard to get them back into DC, but that's one thing they're trying. We had more momentum in the 2010s when it came to small tech companies in the early 2010s.
Well, and the argument then was that, yeah, Nova may have a more attractive tax situation or whatever, but ultimately these companies hire young creatives who want to live in the city, and it's advantageous to them to be near the people they want to hire. But this sounds like a more one-to-one effort to diversify the economy, which is to say the people in these industries get paid pretty well, like civil servants and federal contractors.
Yes, and they're hoping that this replaces the federal jobs, I think. I mean, they need to diversify, but the top line is, and it says it right here on the mayor's PowerPoint, they're, quote, doubling down on sports entertainment. So it brings it back to your point. They want to bring new life to DC's theaters. They want to invest in what they call the sports capital. And they just think that this is the engine for downtown's or DC's growth, not just downtown.
So there's one other curveball at the very end of her presentation, and you were in the room, and I imagine it was interesting when it happened. Bowser wants to fully reinstate the tipped minimum wage, which DC had started eliminating after voters for the second time approved it in a ballot initiative. We did an entire episode about this yesterday. But since you know City Hall so well, I'm curious for your thoughts. Do you think this will pass the council?
Well, they overturned it once. Then the public went again to the ballot box and passed this with 74% support. And Council Chairman Phil Mendelson has been against this initiative every single time. But he said that he doesn't think there's enough support on the council right now to repeal it again. It's going to be part of the mayor's budget proposal, so it'll be part of this whole package. The council can go and take that out of the budget proposal. But again, there is a vibe shift. There is a realization that businesses are struggling, that the tax base of the city is struggling. So this might be as good of any time to campaign for this. The restaurant community is renewing their trying to advocate for it to be repealed. But it's a long wish list that at some point you can't get everything you want if you're the business community, I think. So this is something, it's really hard to see where the winds are going, but I think Mendelsohn has his finger on the pulse when he says the support's probably not there on the council.
So you say it's you don't get your whole wish list, no matter who you are, really. But you've done this for a few years. A certain amount changes between the mayor making a proposal and the council voting on a budget. How much usually changes, and what do you suspect will be different this year? Do you think she'll get more of what she wants, or less, or about the same?
The council can re-engineer the whole thing. It's just they don't have as much time as they used to. And I say time, they have the same number of days, but it's going to be packed with a lot of other big ticket items. So I think the cuts are the big question mark. We don't know. The mayor's supposed to have the full budget out by May 15th. It might be even later now. Some of these items, the tech investments, the tax breaks for some of these startups might go through just because I'm not hearing a lot of noise against them. These were the kinds of incentives for businesses that people just, scoffed at on the council over the past decade as ineffective and not worthwhile for taxpayers to put their money in. But I think something like Initiative 82's repeal, I just hesitate to make a prediction because I truly don't know. And I think if it does get repealed, that would be, frankly, a sea change moment because the progressive era is truly over if that gets repealed again. So I suspect that they can tinker that perhaps, but it would say a lot if it got repealed.
Besides Mendelsohn, the council chair, have any of the members said anything about the budget yet? And what kind of noises have you been hearing?
Other than we want the budget, they've wanted. I mean, this is inside baseball maybe, but the budget was supposed to be at the council about 2 months ago. We were supposed to be in the thick of public hearings and budget revisions. There are a lot of reasons why that's not happening, and a lot of reasons the council is mad at the mayor and mad at Congress, maybe more so about why it's not happening. The problem is you're getting these piecemeal announcements from the mayor, but you're not hearing what's being cut to make these investments. So you're putting money into RFK, but what's being cut? Is there a school renovation that's not going to happen? Is there a rec center that's not going to be built? What are the trade-offs? And we don't know.
What's the next date to look for? You mentioned May 15th.
They said May 15th. And Chairman Mendelsohn said, well, it could be more like late May.
And what about public hearings?
And public hearings would be in June and in early July. But they would like to pass this whole thing by late July. It's looking like maybe early August at this point. And if I can add this tidbit about RFK Stadium, previously the chairman said, it'll be virtually impossible to consider RFK Stadium and a budget at the same time. I think he's going to have to do it because on Monday, the Commanders, the Washington Post reported, met with council members in the Wilson building and had this sort of event where they pitched the stadium and got to know some of the council members. Josh Harris was there, Roger Goodell was there, and they talked about their DC roots. This is a full court press from the team for this deal. So I don't know if it's going to fly that Mendelsohn's saying we don't have enough time. I think they're going to have to get to work.
Cuneyt, thanks for being here.
Hey, good to chat.
Hey, before we go, I want to give a big thank you to our newest CityCast DC neighbors, Ben R., Philip G., Dorinda O., Melissa L., Maximilian S., and Benjamin C. Thank you all for joining. And that's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.